The morning sun shone through the tall windows of the county courthouse as Lisa Chen walked through the heavy wooden doors. She clutched a worn leather bag filled with carefully organized papers against her chest like a shield. Her long brown hair was tied back in a simple ponytail, and she wore a clean but clearly old blue blouse and dark pants that had seen better days. Nothing about her suggested she belonged in this imposing building with its marble floors and oak-paneled walls. Lisa took a deep breath and checked the courthouse directory. Room 307, third floor. Her hands trembled slightly as she adjusted her glasses and headed for the stairs, not wanting to wait for the crowded elevator. Today was important. After months of worry and sleepless nights, she would finally face the developer who claimed her family's land belonged to them. Westridge Development wanted to build luxury condos on the 3 acres where her grandmother's house stood, the house where Lisa had spent the last 8 years as a caretaker. "It's just a misunderstanding," she whispered to herself as she climbed the stairs. "I just need to show them the property lines and the old deed." The third-floor hallway buzzed with activity. Men and women in expensive suits strode purposefully between courtrooms, their leather briefcases and confident voices filling the space. Lisa felt even more out of place as she approached courtroom 307, where a small group waited outside the doors. On a nearby bench sat 3 people in matching navy suits, the Westridge legal team. The woman and 2 men huddled together, occasionally glancing at Lisa with barely concealed smirks. "Is that her?" the younger man whispered, not quietly enough. "That's who we're up against?" The woman lawyer gave a small laugh. "This should be quick. Judge Henderson hates people who represent themselves." Lisa pretended not to hear as she found a spot to stand against the wall. She opened her bag, double-checking her documents. The property deed her grandfather had left her grandmother, the survey from 1978, the property tax receipts going back 30 years, the letter she had sent to Westridge explaining the mistake, all unanswered. At exactly 9:00, the bailiff opened the courtroom doors. "All rise for the Honorable Judge William Henderson." Lisa entered the courtroom and took her position at the table marked Defendant. Across the aisle, the Westridge lawyers arranged their documents with practiced efficiency. Their table overflowed with legal binders and folders, while Lisa's space held only her worn leather bag. Judge Henderson entered briskly. He was a tall man in his 60s with silver hair and sharp blue eyes that seemed to miss nothing. His reputation preceded him, 25 years on the bench, known for his impatience and strict adherence to procedure. "Be seated," he said, adjusting his glasses as he reviewed the docket. Case number 2025 CV 4873, Westridge Development versus Chen, property dispute. He looked up, his gaze moving between the tables. "I see Westridge has counsel. Ms. Chen, are you representing yourself today?" Lisa stood, her heart pounding. "Yes, Your Honor." The judge frowned slightly. "Very well, Mr. Powell, please present your client's case." The older Westridge lawyer rose smoothly. "Thank you, Your Honor. This is a straightforward matter of property boundaries. My client, Westridge Development, purchased the Oak Ridge estate last year, which includes the parcel known as Lot 47, where the defendant is currently residing. We have the deed and surveys clearly showing this land belongs to the Oak Ridge property. We've attempted to resolve this matter amicably, offering generous relocation assistance, but Ms. Chen has refused to vacate the property, halting a development project that would bring jobs and tax revenue to the county." Mr. Powell presented several documents to the court clerk, who handed them to the judge. Lisa watched anxiously as Judge Henderson reviewed them with a practiced eye. "And Ms. Chen," the judge said without looking up, "what is your response to these claims?" Lisa stood again, trying to keep her voice steady. "Your Honor, there's been a mistake. The land where my grandmother's house stands has been in our family since 1962. Do you have legal documentation to support this claim?" The judge interrupted. "Yes, Your Honor. I brought the original deed and has this deed been properly recorded with the county assessor's office?" Judge Henderson's tone suggested he already knew the answer. Lisa hesitated. "I'm not sure what that means exactly, but..." The judge sighed audibly. "Ms. Chen, this court operates on legal evidence, not family stories. The county records show this land as part of the Oak Ridge estate." "But that's the mistake, Your Honor," Lisa tried again. "If you look at the original boundaries, Ms. Chen," Judge Henderson cut in sharply, "this courtroom isn't the place for amateurs to learn property law. If you're serious about contesting this claim, I strongly suggest you hire an attorney who understands how to properly present evidence. Laughter rippled through the courtroom. The Westridge lawyers exchanged knowing smiles, but I can't afford, Lisa began. That's not the court's concern, the judge said. We have rules of procedure that exist for good reason. This isn't a neighborhood dispute to be settled over a fence. Lisa felt heat rising in her cheeks as several people in the gallery chuckled. She gripped the edge of the table. Your Honor, she said quietly, I understand this is formal, but the truth is simple. Their survey is wrong. I have the original documents here. She reached into her bag. Judge Henderson looked at his watch impatiently. Ms. Chen, have you filed these documents as exhibits according to county procedure? I brought them with me today, she said. The judge shook his head, not bothering to hide his irritation. That's not how this works. Evidence must be properly filed and served on opposing counsel before the hearing. I didn't know that, Lisa admitted. Clearly, the judge replied dryly, causing more laughter. This is exactly why self-representation is almost always a bad idea. The law is not a hobby one picks up in their spare time. Mr. Powell stood again. Your Honor, given the defendant's lack of preparation, we request an immediate ruling on our petition to take possession of the property. Lisa felt panic rising. Please, Your Honor, I just need more time to— Ms. Chen, the judge interrupted again, his voice stern but with a hint of something like pity. The court isn't here to teach you law school. However, I'm not prepared to issue a final ruling today. He turned to the Westridge lawyers. Mr. Powell, your documentation appears in order, but I want to give Ms. Chen one opportunity to properly present her case. The lawyer frowned. Your Honor, my client has already faced significant delays. Nevertheless, Judge Henderson said firmly, we will continue this hearing in 2 weeks. Ms. Chen, I strongly advise you to either hire an attorney or, at minimum, visit the court's self-help center to learn the proper procedures for filing evidence. He looked directly at her. Do you understand? Lisa nodded, relief washing over her. Yes, Your Honor, thank you. Don't thank me yet, he replied. I'm not doing you any favors. If you return unprepared, I will rule accordingly. He made a note in the file. 2 weeks from today, same time. Court is adjourned. As the judge left the courtroom, Lisa gathered her papers with shaking hands. She had 2 weeks. 2 weeks to figure out how to fight for her grandmother's home against a team of professional lawyers and a judge who clearly thought she was wasting everyone's time. At the next table, she overheard one of the Westridge lawyers. Henderson's going to tear her apart next time. Did you see how flustered she was? Almost felt sorry for her, another replied, not sounding sorry at all. Lisa tucked her papers back into her bag and walked out with her head high, despite the knot in her stomach. In the hallway, she stopped at the directory board and found what she needed. Legal Self-Help Center, Room 118. 2 weeks wasn't much time. But maybe, just maybe, it would be enough. 2 weeks passed in a blur for Lisa. Every day after finishing her shift at the local diner, she hurried to the courthouse's self-help center, staying until closing time. The center volunteers seemed surprised by her dedication, watching as she filled out form after form and pored over property law guides. You're really determined, remarked an older volunteer named Patty, sliding another helpful booklet across the table. Lisa looked up, dark circles under her eyes. That house is all I have left of my grandmother. She raised me there after my parents died. I can't lose it to some mistake on a map. The morning of the hearing arrived with gray skies threatening rain. Lisa dressed carefully in her best outfit, a simple navy dress she'd bought second-hand but pressed meticulously. Her hands trembled slightly as she organized her documents into a new folder, labeled and tabbed according to court requirements. The courthouse seemed less intimidating this time as she climbed the familiar steps. Outside courtroom 307, the Westridge legal team huddled together, now 4 strong. They'd added another lawyer, a stern-looking woman with stylish glasses who studied Lisa with cold calculation. Good morning, Lisa said politely as she passed them. They barely acknowledged her, turning back to their whispered conversation. She caught fragments, waste of time, and quick dismissal. Inside the courtroom, Lisa took her place, arranging her materials with care. When Judge Henderson entered, she stood tall, forcing herself to meet his gaze. Case number 2025 CV 4873, the clerk announced. Westridge Development versus Chen. Judge Henderson settled into his chair, reviewing notes. I see Ms. Chen has returned. Have you secured legal counsel? No, Your Honor, but I've prepared my documentation according to court procedures, Lisa replied, her voice steadier than last time. The judge raised an eyebrow. Very well. Mr. Powell, any preliminary matters before we continue? The lead Westridge lawyer stood. Yes, Your Honor. We've submitted a motion for summary judgment given the clear property records. We believe the defendant's claims lack any legal foundation. Judge Henderson noted. Ms. Chen, are you prepared to present your evidence today? Yes, Your Honor. Lisa stood and distributed copies of her documentation to the court clerk and opposing counsel, as she'd learned at the self-help center. The judge reviewed the papers, his expression unchanging. After a long moment, he looked up. Ms. Chen, I see you've put in some effort, but these documents don't address the fundamental legal issues. The property records clearly show, if I may. Your Honor, Lisa interrupted, then quickly added, I apologize for the interruption, but there's something important about those records. The courtroom went silent. No one interrupted Judge Henderson. His eyes narrowed. Proceed, but tread carefully. Lisa took a deep breath. The county records are incorrect because of a surveying error made in 1987. If you'll look at Exhibit C, the original property line follows the creek bed, which has shifted over time. The 1987 survey incorrectly used the current creek position rather than the original markers. Judge Henderson frowned, turning to the exhibit. And how exactly did you determine this was an error? The original survey markers are still there, Your Honor. Cast iron stakes set in concrete. They're referenced in my grandfather's deed from 1962, which I've included as Exhibit A. The 1987 survey ignored these markers completely. The judge studied the documents with new interest. The Westridge lawyers exchanged glances. Ms. Chen, Judge Henderson said finally, while you've raised an interesting point about the survey markers, this doesn't resolve the legal question of adverse possession and property recording requirements. Perhaps you can explain how your claim addresses these issues? Lisa recognized the trap immediately. The judge was using technical legal terms to test her, expecting her to fumble. Of course, Your Honor, she said, surprising herself with her calm. Adverse possession doesn't apply here because my family's occupation of the property has never been adverse. We've been the legal owners since 1962. The recording issue arises from the county's acceptance of the flawed 1987 survey. But under state law, when original survey monuments exist, they take precedence over later measurements. A murmur ran through the courtroom. Judge Henderson's eyebrows rose slightly. And can you cite the relevant statute? He asked, his tone challenging. Lisa hesitated only a moment. State Property Code Section 573.14. Your Honor, original monuments, when found, hold precedence over subsequent surveys of the same property. The state Supreme Court affirmed this in Wilkins v. County of Riverside. Sign 98. The courtroom fell silent again. Judge Henderson studied Lisa with new intensity. Well, he said finally, it seems you've done more research than I anticipated. Mr. Powell, how do you respond to Ms. Chen's claims about the survey markers? The Westridge lawyer stood quickly. Your Honor, this is the first we're hearing about supposed original markers. We've relied on county records, which clearly show. Yes, but Ms. Chen is challenging the accuracy of those records, the judge interrupted. If her claim about the original markers is true, it raises legitimate questions. Mr. Powell's face tightened. We'd need to verify these alleged markers, Your Honor. And regardless, my client purchased the property based on county records in good faith. A bona fide purchaser argument, Lisa said quietly. Judge Henderson's gaze snapped to her. What was that, Ms. Chen? She straightened. Mr. Powell is suggesting Westridge is a bona fide purchaser who relied on official records. But that doctrine doesn't erase existing property rights when the error is in the record itself. The judge leaned forward. Ms. Chen, where exactly did you learn property law? The courtroom waited for her answer. The Self-Help Center has excellent resources, she said simply. And I've always been a quick study. Something flickered across Judge Henderson's face, doubt, perhaps, or curiosity, I see. He turned back to Mr. Powell. Counselor, given these new allegations about survey markers, I believe an independent survey is warranted. The Westridge team erupted in objections. Your Honor, delays will cost my client thousands. Mr. Powell, the judge cut in sharply. If Ms. Chen is correct about the original markers, proceeding without verification could create even more costly problems. I'm ordering an independent survey to verify the boundary claims. He made notes in the file before continuing. Additionally, I'd like both parties to submit briefs on the legal precedent regarding original monuments versus subsequent surveys. Ms. Chen has cited Wilkins vs. Riverside. I expect your response to address this specifically. Mr. Powell, the lead Westridge lawyer, looks stunned. Yes, Your Honor. Ms. Chen, the judge continued, are you capable of preparing such a brief? Lisa nodded. Yes, Your Honor. How long do we have? 2 weeks for the survey to be completed. Briefs due 3 days after the survey results are filed. Judge Henderson's eyes lingered on Lisa. Ms. Chen, while I'm impressed with your preparation today, I strongly suggest you consult with an attorney, even if just for guidance on your brief. I understand, Your Honor. Thank you. As the judge adjourned the hearing, the whispers in the courtroom grew. The Westridge team huddled immediately, their expressions concerned. Lisa gathered her documents, feeling a small surge of hope for the first time in months. In the hallway, a court clerk stopped her. Ms. Chen, Judge Henderson asked me to give you this. He handed her a business card. It's for the county law library. They have more extensive resources than the self-help center. Lisa looked at the card, then at the retreating clerk. Thank you, she said, though he was already gone. Outside the courthouse, the rain had started, but Lisa hardly noticed. Something had shifted today. For the first time, someone had actually listened to her. The battle was far from over. Westridge had money, power, and a team of expensive lawyers. But today in that courtroom, none of that had mattered. Only the facts had mattered, and for now that was enough to keep fighting. As she walked to the bus stop, Lisa pulled out her phone and searched for Wilkins vs. Riverside full-case text. There was much more work to do, and she wasn't going to waste a single minute. The county law library became Lisa's second home over the next 2 weeks. Unlike the busy self-help center, the library occupied a quiet corner of the courthouse basement, with tall shelves of law books and outdated computers. Most days she was the only person there besides the librarian, an older man named Frank who watched with growing interest as she worked. Property law, huh? Frank asked on her third day, placing a stack of case reporters on her table. Tough area. Lisa looked up from her notes and smiled. It can be. Thank you for finding these. Frank lingered, glancing at her organized notes. You know, most folks who come in here without a law degree can barely navigate the index. You seem comfortable. I like research, Lisa said simply, returning to her work. The truth was more complicated. As the days passed, something was happening to Lisa, like waking up from a long sleep. Legal terms and concepts that should have been foreign felt familiar. Cases she'd never heard of sparked recognition. Sometimes she found herself writing citations before looking them up, only to discover she had them right. On day 9, her phone rang as she was leaving the library, an unfamiliar number. Miss Chen, this is Robert Jackson from County Survey. We've completed the boundary survey for your property dispute. Lisa's heart raced. And, well, this is unusual. We found exactly what you described. 4 original iron markers set in concrete, dated 1962. They clearly mark a boundary that differs from current county records. Lisa pressed a hand against the wall to steady herself. So the property line should follow the original markers, not the current creek bed? Technically, yes. Original monuments hold precedence, he paused. Though I should warn you, Westridge's lawyers have already been calling, asking very pointed questions. Thank you for letting me know. Lisa hung up and leaned against the courthouse wall, closing her eyes briefly. One hurdle cleared. Now for the legal brief. She worked through the night in her small apartment, surrounded by photocopies and notes. By morning, she had produced a 15-page document analyzing the legal precedent of boundary disputes involving original survey markers. She cited 17 cases spanning 8 decades, carefully building her argument that the original property lines must be honored. When she finally delivered her brief to the court clerk, the woman behind the counter raised her eyebrows. This is comprehensive. Lisa managed a tired smile. Is it too long? For a pro se litigant, most just write a paragraph saying it's unfair and they should win. The clerk flipped through the pages with growing surprise. This looks like something from one of the big firms. 3 days later, Lisa returned to courtroom 307, clutching a copy of her brief and the survey report. The room was fuller than before. Several attorneys from other cases lingered, having heard whispers about the unusual property dispute. The Westridge team now occupied 2 tables with 6 lawyers and a surveying expert. Their faces were grim as Lisa walked past. Judge Henderson entered, his gaze immediately finding Lisa. Something had changed in his expression. The dismissive look was gone, replaced with cautious curiosity. Case number 2025 CV 4873, the clerk announced. Westridge Development versus Chen. The judge nodded. I've reviewed the independent survey report and the briefs submitted by both parties. He looked at the Westridge team. Mr. Powell, your response to the survey findings. The lead attorney stood. Your Honor, while we acknowledge the survey located markers claiming to be from 1962, we maintain that subsequent surveys and county records should prevail. The property has been recorded with the current boundaries for nearly 4 decades. Westridge purchased based on these official records and has invested millions in development plans. Judge Henderson turned to Lisa. Ms. Chen, your response? Lisa rose, feeling strangely calm. Your Honor, property law is built on a foundation of certainty. That certainty comes not from convenience or recent investments, but from original intent and physical monumentation. When my grandfather purchased this land in 1962, the boundaries were clearly marked with monuments that still exist today. She opened a folder on her table.
In Thornton versus Pandell,
The state Supreme Court held that original monuments, when found undisturbed, are the highest evidence of the true location of a boundary line. The court further explained that subsequent surveys or recordings cannot override these physical markers. Mr. Powell interrupted. Your Honor, Thornton dealt with a different situation entirely. Actually, Lisa continued, her voice stronger. Thornton involved a property dispute between an original homeowner and a developer who relied on updated county records, precisely our situation, and the court ruled unanimously in favor of the original boundaries. The courtroom had gone completely silent. Judge Henderson leaned forward. Ms. Chen is correct about Thornton. The parallels are notable. He turned to his clerk. Please bring me Ms. Chen's brief again. As he flipped through it, his expression grew increasingly thoughtful. Ms. Chen, on page 7, you discussed the doctrine of monument control over measurements, citing Reynolds versus County of Alameda. That case isn't mentioned in any of the standard property law treatises. How did you come across it? Lisa hesitated only briefly. The law library has archives of the Northern District Reporter. Reynolds is a footnote in the Wilkins case. The judge nodded slowly, studying her with open curiosity now. Very thorough research. He turned to Westridge's team. Mr. Powell, your brief doesn't address Reynolds at all. The lawyer shifted uncomfortably. We focused on more recent precedents, Your Honor. Yet Ms. Chen demonstrates that the principle has remained consistent for over a century. Judge Henderson closed the brief. I find Ms. Chen's legal reasoning persuasive. The survey confirms the original monuments exist exactly where she claimed, and the law is clear that such monuments control boundary determinations. The Westridge team exchanged alarmed glances. Their expert whispered urgently to Mr. Powell, who stood again. Your Honor, we request a continuance to prepare additional arguments. This is a complex property matter with significant financial implications. The judge considered this. I'll grant a 1-week continuance for both parties to prepare final arguments. However, I want to be clear. Based on the evidence and briefs before me, I'm inclined to rule that the original survey markers establish the true property line. As the courtroom began to empty, Lisa gathered her papers, aware of the stares from the Westridge team and other observers. One of the younger Westridge lawyers approached her cautiously. That was impressive, he said quietly. Where did you go to law school? Before Lisa could answer, Judge Henderson's clerk appeared at her elbow. Ms. Chen? The judge would like to see you in his chambers. Lisa followed the clerk through a side door into a wood-paneled office where Judge Henderson sat behind a large desk, her brief open before him. Please, sit down, he said, gesturing to a chair. As she sat, he studied her with undisguised curiosity. Ms. Chen, I've been on this bench for 25 years. I've seen thousands of attorneys argue cases before me. He tapped her brief. This is exceptional legal work by any standard. Thank you, Your Honor. Which makes me wonder why you're waiting tables at a diner and representing yourself. His tone was gentle but direct. Who are you, really? Lisa looked down at her hands. Just someone trying to save her home. No, he said firmly. This level of legal analysis doesn't come from a few weeks in a law library. You cite cases that seasoned attorneys don't know. You understand complex legal doctrines that take years to master. He leaned forward. I checked the bar directory. There's no attorney named Lisa Chen licensed in this state. I never said I was an attorney, she replied carefully. Then how do you explain this? He held up her brief. Lisa met his gaze steadily. People can surprise you sometimes, Your Honor. Judge Henderson sat back in his chair, a small smile forming. Indeed they can, Ms. Chen, indeed they can. He closed the brief. Whatever your story is, you should know that Westridge isn't going to give up easily. They have resources and connections. The fact that they've added more attorneys tells me they're taking you very seriously now. I understand. Good. He stood, signaling the meeting was over. I'll see you in 1 week for final arguments. As Lisa left the courthouse, she felt oddly light despite the challenges ahead. For years, she'd buried a part of herself, focused only on caring for her grandmother and surviving day to day. Now that hidden part was awakening, like a limb regaining feeling after being asleep. In her bag, her phone buzzed with a message from her boss at the diner. You're late for your shift. Lisa paused on the courthouse steps. The old life was calling, but something new was emerging. And for the first time in a very long time, she allowed herself to wonder what might be possible. Judge Henderson couldn't focus on the other cases before him that week. His mind kept returning to Lisa Chen and her remarkable brief. Something didn't add up. After court adjourned on Thursday, he called his law clerk into his chambers. Tom, I need you to look into someone for me. The young clerk looked up from his notepad. For the Westridge case, Your Honor. Yes, Lisa Chen, the woman representing herself. The judge leaned back in his chair. There's more to her than she's letting on. See what you can find, education records, employment history, anything. Is that appropriate, Your Honor? Tom asked hesitantly. Judge Henderson frowned. This isn't personal curiosity. It's potentially relevant to the case. If she has specialized knowledge or experience she hasn't disclosed, the court should be aware. Of course, Your Honor. I'll see what I can find. Meanwhile, Lisa had quit her job at the diner. Her manager had been understanding but firm. She'd missed too many shifts. Now she sat at her kitchen table surrounded by legal books borrowed from the law library, preparing for the final hearing. The phone rang, interrupting her concentration. Ms. Chen, this is David Miller from Westridge Development. Lisa tensed. Yes? I'd like to meet with you to discuss a settlement offer. Tomorrow morning, if possible. She hesitated. I'd prefer any offers in writing, Mr. Miller. This is a time-sensitive matter, he pressed. We're prepared to be generous, but only if we can resolve this quickly. After a moment's consideration, Lisa agreed to meet him at a coffee shop downtown. She spent the night researching settlement agreements and proper negotiation tactics, sleeping only a few hours before the meeting. The coffee shop was busy when she arrived. David Miller was easy to spot. Expensive suit, leather briefcase, impatient expression. He stood as she approached. Ms. Chen, thank you for coming. His smile didn't reach his eyes. Coffee? No, thank you. You mentioned an offer? His smile tightened. Direct, I see. Very well. He opened his briefcase and slid a document across the table. Westridge is prepared to offer you $100,000 to settle this matter and vacate the property within 30 days. Lisa glanced at the document without touching it. That's significantly below market value for 3 acres in that area. Perhaps, but it's a generous offer considering the legal uncertainties. His tone hardened slightly. My clients are not accustomed to losing, Ms. Chen. They have connections throughout the county. Even if you win this round, they can make things very difficult for you. Are you threatening me, Mr. Miller? Lisa's voice remained calm. Simply stating facts. You've impressed everyone with your unexpected legal knowledge. But Westridge has endless resources for appeals, delays, and other legal maneuvers. He leaned forward. Take the money, move on. Some battles aren't worth fighting. Lisa studied him for a long moment. Thank you for the offer, but I'll see you in court. As she left the coffee shop, Lisa felt a strange mix of fear and exhilaration. For years, she'd avoided conflict, kept her head down, tried to be invisible. Now she was walking straight into a fight with a powerful opponent, and oddly enough, it felt right. Back at the courthouse, Judge Henderson's clerk had made a discovery. Your Honor, you need to see this. Tom placed a folder on the judge's desk. Inside was a printout from the alumni directory of Harvard Law School, class of 2010. There, listed among the graduates, Li Hua Chen, summa cum laude, editor of the Harvard Law Review below, was a newspaper clipping from 2011 rising star attorney tapped for HOA Supreme Court clerkship. The grainy photo showed a younger woman with the same eyes and smile as the Lisa Chen in his courtroom, though with more formal attire and a different hairstyle. There's more, Tom said, pulling out another document. She worked at Brennan and Walsh in New York after her clerkship. Top firm, fast-tracked for partner. Then she disappeared from the legal world in 2016. No bar records, no court appearances, nothing. Judge Henderson stared at the documents. Li Hua Chen, she goes by Lisa now. Should I continue investigating, Your Honor? The judge was quiet for a moment. No, this is enough. He closed the folder. Thank you, Tom. I'd like to keep this between us for now. The following Monday, courtroom 307 was packed for the final hearing. The Westridge team had grown again, now with senior partners and even the company's CEO in attendance. Whispers rippled through the gallery as Lisa entered, looking tired but composed in the same navy dress she'd worn to the previous hearing. Judge Henderson studied her as she arranged her materials, seeing her now through new eyes. Not a lucky amateur who'd stumbled across a few good legal arguments, but a brilliant legal mind who had chosen, for reasons unknown, to hide her abilities. Case number 2025 CV 4873, the clerk announced. Westridge Development versus Chen. The judge nodded. We're here for final arguments. Mr. Powell, you may begin. Westridge's lead attorney had clearly prepared extensively. For 40 minutes, he presented a polished argument about property registration requirements, reliance interests, and the economic impact of enforcing outdated boundaries. He cited recent cases, economic studies, and policy arguments. Your Honor, he concluded, while Ms. Chen's arguments about original monuments have technical merit, the practical reality and public policy strongly favor upholding current county records. To rule otherwise would create uncertainty in property transactions across the county and potentially the state. Judge Henderson turned to Lisa. Ms. Chen, your final argument? Lisa rose, looking directly at the judge. Your Honor, this case may seem complex, but at its heart it's quite simple. The law has always recognized that physical monuments marking boundaries take precedence over paper descriptions or later surveys. This isn't just a technical rule, it reflects a deeper principle. That the original intent of the parties, physically marked on the land itself, should not be erased by later errors or convenience. As she continued, her voice grew stronger, more assured. She methodically dismantled each of Powell's arguments, citing cases with precise detail, distinguishing others, building a compelling narrative about property rights and certainty. Mr. Powell suggests that enforcing the original boundaries would create uncertainty, she said, approaching her conclusion. But the opposite is true. What creates uncertainty is telling property owners that the physical markers they relied on can be casually overridden by later mistakes. What creates uncertainty is saying that powerful developers can redraw boundaries through political influence or simply wearing down less resourced opponents. She turned slightly, addressing not just the judge now but the entire courtroom. The law must protect property rights equally, not just for those with expensive legal teams, but for everyday people who trust that the boundaries they were shown when they purchased will remain their boundaries for as long as they own the land. As she finished, the courtroom was utterly silent. Judge Henderson watched her for a long moment before speaking. Thank you both for your arguments. This case has proven more interesting than I initially anticipated. He gathered his notes. I'll take this under advisement and issue my ruling tomorrow morning at 9 a.m. As the courtroom emptied, Lisa felt a hand on her arm. It was Frank from the law library. Whatever happens tomorrow, he said quietly. That was a masterful argument. Lisa smiled. Thank you, Frank. Outside, reporters had gathered, word having spread about the unusual case. Lisa slipped past them, avoiding questions. She needed time alone to prepare for whatever came next. That evening, as she walked through the small house that had been her grandmother's, touching familiar objects, remembering the woman who had taken her in when her life had fallen apart, Lisa felt a sense of peace regardless of the outcome. She had fought, really fought, for something that mattered. The next morning, she arrived early to find the courtroom already filling. The Westridge team looked confident despite her performance the previous day. Lisa took her place, hands steady as she arranged her notes. When Judge Henderson entered, his expression was unreadable. He sat, arranged his papers, and looked up at the packed courtroom. "Before I deliver my ruling in this matter," he began, "there's a preliminary issue I need to address." His gaze fixed on Lisa. "Ms. Chen, would you please approach the bench?" Confused murmurs filled the courtroom as Lisa rose and walked forward. "Ms. Chen," the judge said, his voice low enough that only she could hear. "Or should I say Ms. Li Hua Chen, Harvard Law School, class of 2010, Supreme Court clerk, former associate at Brennan and Walsh?" Lisa went still, color draining from her face. "How did you—" "That's not important," Judge Henderson interrupted gently. "What I want to know is why one of the most promising legal minds of her generation is waiting tables and hiding her abilities." "Why didn't you tell me who you really are?" Lisa looked down at her hands. "Because I wanted to win or lose based on the merits of the case, not my credentials." She hesitated. "And because I left that life behind for a reason." Judge Henderson studied her face. "Whatever your reasons, you should know that your arguments would have impressed me regardless of your background." He paused. "Return to your seat, Ms. Chen. I'm ready to deliver my ruling." As Lisa walked back, she felt as though she were crossing a threshold, from one life into another. Whatever came next, there would be no going back to the shadows. Lisa returned to her seat feeling as though the floor might give way beneath her. After 8 years of carefully constructed anonymity, her past had found her. The courtroom seemed to spin slightly as Judge Henderson cleared his throat and began to speak. "In the matter of Westridge Development versus Chen, I am prepared to deliver my ruling." His voice was steady, formal. "This case, which initially appeared straightforward, has proven to be anything but." The judge looked directly at the Westridge legal team. "Property law is built on certainty and predictability. When physical monuments marking original boundaries exist and can be verified, they take precedence over subsequent paper descriptions or recordings. This principle dates back centuries in our legal tradition and has been consistently upheld by courts across this country." He lifted the survey report. "The independent survey confirms that the original 1962 boundary markers exist exactly where Ms. Chen claimed. These markers establish a property line that differs from current county records due to an error in a 1987 survey." The Westridge CEO leaned forward, whispering urgently to Mr. Powell, who raised his hand. "Your Honor, before you continue, we'd like to—" "I'm not finished, Mr. Powell." Judge Henderson's tone left no room for interruption. "Based on the evidence presented and the applicable law, I find that the original boundary markers establish the true property line. The 3 acres in question legally belong to Ms. Chen as the inheritor of her grandfather's property." A murmur rippled through the courtroom. Lisa sat perfectly still, hardly daring to breathe. "Furthermore," the judge continued, "I am ordering the county assessor to correct the property records to reflect the true boundary. Westridge Development is permanently enjoined from any development activity on the 3 acres in question." Mr. Powell stood immediately. "Your Honor, we intend to appeal." "That is your right, of course," Judge Henderson replied calmly. "However, you should advise your client that given the clear physical evidence and settled law on this matter, your chances of success are minimal. Sometimes, Mr. Powell, the most valuable service an attorney can provide is advising a client when to stop fighting." The judge gathered his papers. "This matter is concluded. Court is adjourned." The gavel fell with a sharp crack. For a moment, no one moved. Then the courtroom erupted in motion and sound, reporters rushing for the door, the Westridge team huddling in urgent discussion, observers buzzing with commentary. Lisa remained seated, letting the reality sink in. She had won. The home her grandmother had loved, where she had spent her final years, was safe. Ms. Chen. Frank from the law library appeared beside her. "Congratulations," she looked up, still dazed. "Thank you, Frank, for everything." "Don't thank me. This was all you." He hesitated. "The judge's clerk told me about your background. Harvard Law, Supreme Court clerkship. Why did you leave all that behind?" Lisa gathered her papers slowly. "It's complicated. Most worthwhile things are." Frank smiled. "Whatever your reasons, the legal world lost something special when you walked away." As the courtroom emptied, Lisa noticed Judge Henderson watching her from the doorway to his chambers. He nodded slightly, gesturing for her to follow. Once inside his office, he closed the door and motioned for her to sit. "I owe you an apology, Ms. Chen," he said, taking his seat. Lisa looked surprised. "For what, Your Honor?" "For my behavior during our first hearing. I was dismissive, condescending." He shook his head. "I've seen so many people represent themselves badly that I made assumptions. It was unprofessional. You couldn't have known. That's just it. I shouldn't have needed to know your credentials to treat you with respect." The judge leaned forward. "Your legal work on this case was exceptional. Not good for a non-lawyer. Exceptional by any standard." Lisa looked down. "Thank you. Which brings me to my question." Judge Henderson's voice softened. "Why did you leave? Your professors at Harvard called you one of the most brilliant legal minds they'd ever taught. Justice Abrams said your work during your clerkship was unparalleled. You were on track to become," he gestured broadly, "anything you wanted." Lisa was quiet for a long moment. When she finally spoke, her voice was barely above a whisper. "My grandmother got sick, Alzheimer's. It started while I was at Brennan and Walsh." She met the judge's eyes. "I was working 100-hour weeks on a massive corporate merger. When I asked for time off to help her, my supervisor said, 'That's what nursing homes are for.'" The judge's expression darkened. "That's reprehensible. It was the culture. Success at any cost." Lisa continued. "I took a week of vacation to move her to New York, but she hated it there, confused, frightened, away from everything familiar. One night she called me crying, begging to go home, and I was stuck in a conference room reviewing documents for a client who was hiding environmental violations." She paused, remembering. "I walked out that night. Just left everything, my apartment, my career, all of it. Brought her back here to the house she loved. And somehow, I never went back." Judge Henderson nodded slowly. "You chose compassion over ambition. I chose my grandmother over a system that seemed increasingly disconnected from real people and real problems." Lisa managed a small smile. "Anyway, she needed me. And after she passed, I just stayed. It was peaceful being nobody special." The judge considered this. "And now? The case is over. Your grandmother is gone. What's next for Li Huachen?" She shook her head. "I don't know. I can't go back to corporate law." "Who said anything about corporate law?" Judge Henderson pulled a folder from his desk. "The County Legal Aid Office has an opening for a senior attorney. They help low-income residents with housing issues, family law, property disputes." He slid the folder toward her. "The kind of law that directly helps people." Lisa stared at the folder without touching it. "I let my bar membership lapse years ago. You can reactivate it. A few continuing education credits, some paperwork." He shrugged. "A minor hurdle for someone who cited Reynolds versus County of Alameda from memory." "I don't know, Your Honor." "William," he corrected. "We're not in court anymore." He stood and walked to the window. "For 25 years, I've watched brilliant lawyers use their gifts to help wealthy corporations become wealthier. Meanwhile, people who really need legal help can't afford it." He turned back to her. "You have a rare combination. Exceptional legal ability and genuine compassion. Think about what that could mean for people who are facing the system alone, the way you pretended to be." Lisa finally reached for the folder. "I'll think about it." 3 months later, on a crisp autumn morning, Lisa walked up the steps of the county courthouse. Her hair was pulled back neatly and she wore a simple but professional dark blue suit. She carried a new leather briefcase, a gift from Judge Henderson when she passed her updated bar exam. Inside, she nodded to the security guards who smiled in recognition. Since her case had made the local papers, she'd become something of a courthouse celebrity. "Morning, counselor," called Frank from the law library as she passed. "Morning, Frank. I'll need those landlord-tenant cases we discussed later." "Already pulled them for you," he replied with a wink. Lisa continued to the 3rd floor, not to courtroom 307 this time, but to a modest office with a newly installed plaque, County Legal Aid Clinic. Inside, 3 paralegals were already at work, phones ringing as the day began. "Ms. Chen, your 9 o'clock is here," said the receptionist. "First-time homeowner facing foreclosure due to predatory lending." Lisa nodded, setting down her briefcase. "Send them in, please." As her client entered, an elderly man clutching a stack of confusing loan documents, Lisa gestured to the chair across from her desk. "Please sit down," she said warmly. "Tell me what's happening and we'll figure this out together." The man sank into the chair with visible relief. "The bank says I have to be out by next week, but this has been my home for 40 years. Lisa listened intently, taking notes. In her mind, she was already mapping out the legal strategies, the precedents she would cite, the arguments she would craft. But more importantly, she saw the person before her, worried, vulnerable, needing someone to stand between him and a system too complex to navigate alone. She had found her place at last, not in the rarefied air of corporate boardrooms or Supreme Court chambers, but here, helping one person at a time, using her gifts to protect homes and families and futures. As she began explaining the foreclosure process in simple terms her client could understand, Lisa caught a glimpse of Judge Henderson passing in the hallway. He paused, looking through the glass door, and gave her a small nod of approval. Lisa smiled back before returning her full attention to her client. There was important work to be done,